Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 2 of whatever we're calling this, the Rings of Power review Patreon bonus
Yeah.
content conversation podcast thing that we're doing here. Slash YouTube, because we're having fun throwing these up on YouTube as well. So, because these are going to Patreon first, if you're one of our patrons, thank you for your support and following us and everything that you do. If you're listening to this after we release it to the public, welcome to you as well. These episodes go to our Patreon first, so you can get exclusive early access to these awesome conversations at patreon.com/InSessionFilm. You can sign up for as low as $1 a month, Christian.
Oh,
$1, you get access to all of our bonus content. I mean, can't
that
really
sounds
beat
pretty
that.
good. I mean,
Sounds pretty
$1
good.
is
For
yeah.
$1.
$1
There-
can buy you a lot. It can buy you
Exactly.
Patreon, it can buy you McChicken. at
Exactly.
McDonald's.
All kinds of fun things. Yeah.
Redbox.
So there are other tiers, though. If you want to support us, there are other rewards up there as well. So thank you. Welcome to all, however you are listening and tuning into this. Joining me once again is the great Christian Eulenberg. Christian, really appreciate you being in on this journey with me. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you. You're far too
Well done.
kind. Very
Well
very
done.
excited. I'm very excited to talk about episode 2 because I think I enjoyed it more than episode 1.
Yes,
But yeah,
we'll get into
definitely
that.
get into it. Yeah.
Let's definitely dive into that. So I guess as a little bit of a recap, in case you missed episode 1 of this, again, patreon.com/InSessionFilm. Christian and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know for me, I liked episode 1. I had my reservations. I talked about how I wasn't sure the Galadriel storyline, where's that going to go? And some of the performances, though, that was kind of my reservation. But as we get into episode 2, I will just flat out say I like this way more than episode 1. I thought it was actually really good. It sounds like you agree with that.
Yeah, episode 1, it felt, I mean, because and I hate making this comparison because everyone's going to be making the comparison between House of the Dragon and Rings of Power, but episode 1 of House of the Dragon, it's like I felt like it was a welcome back to Westeros. I did not get that from Rings of Power episode 1. For some reason, it felt very inconsistent. There was a few story beats or story threads they were following within episode 1, especially with the elf and the human, that kind of, the pacing was all over the place with the first episode. Second episode, definitely way more engaging. I felt like it was way more consistent as well. And it really balanced the, I guess, 4 to 5 different stories that are happening at once. So it's, but they all serve a greater purpose. Yeah.
No, I'm with you. I do think that the pacing and editing, I mean, with shows like this, I feel like you just have to succumb to its structure because there's 5 different threads being pulled all at the same time. I do think, given that structure, I do think Bayona weaves that thread pretty well here, and I was captivated. I was very interested to see how things unfold here. And we can certainly get into some of the nerdy stuff. Maybe I'll leave the details with you to maybe articulate that a little bit further than me. But I will say, coming in with my amateur knowledge of the lore and everything going on here, I really did like it. And I do want to speak to Galadriel because I mentioned that in episode 1. And I do talk more in depth about this in our review of it. If you know, if anyone listening missed it and wants to go back and hear that, but my reservation, again, I don't want to say it's a criticism because it's certainly not. I'm just curious where things are going to go because it sets up her motivation in terms of revenge, trying to get to Sauron, because of the death of her brother. But as we know, once we get to that element of the story, given what we learn in The Lord of the Rings, she's not a part of that story. So I'm not sure where this is going to go. Now, with that said, I'm still willing to see where it goes. And what I find so interesting about Adrift, which is the title of episode 2 here,
right?
She, because at the end of episode 1, spoiler alert, I guess, for anyone that missed the first episode. Well done. But at the end of the first episode, before they sail off to Valinor there, she jumps ship into the water.
Very gracefully.
Yeah, very gracefully. But what's so fascinating about the drama of this episode with Galadriel is that they do something that I feel like many movies do this, where this significant event happens, and because of time, we cut to whatever the next significant event is. And you don't see the middle road, if you will. And to me, it's always been interesting. I'm not a screenwriter by any means, but I've always kicked around this idea of a lot of what we see here that I think would be interesting to take certain tropes in films like that, where, and I think actually Endgame did an interesting job of this as well too, right? Because that first Avengers, just for an example, something that a lot of us have seen and can relate with here, they defeat Loki, right?
Yeah.
There's that last shot of them in the tower and they're all kind of surrounding him. Yeah. And then the next edit from there is this montage of us seeing the aftermath of what happened. We're learning that Loki's going off with Thor back to their home world. And so we don't really see getting from A to B until Endgame. And then what's interesting about Endgame, right, is that you see the moment with them surrounding Loki and he's like, I'll have that drink now. But then what do you see after that is them walking to the elevator.
Yeah.
Them telling Hulk, you got to take the stairs.
Yeah.
And so they're having these like little mini conversations that are kind of mundane, I guess. Like they don't really matter in the grand scheme of it all, which is why it makes sense they don't show us that stuff in movies all the time.
Right.
But I do find that interesting though, that films and especially TV shows, because films don't really have the luxury of giving us that all the time, especially in these epic blockbusters and whatnot. However, TV shows certainly can give us that A to B. So I say all that to say, in most movies, and maybe in a lot of TV shows too, we would see Galadriel jump ship, and the next thing we would see her in is on some ship or on some island, wherever she needs to be next for the narrative to take place. And the question that we would all have is, how did she get there? How did she go from the water to that island? And we get to see that. So, and that's what I'm saying. Like,
I like that.
Most times TV shows and movies skip all that. And again, understandably, but I do love that this series is willing to go there, because she jumps into the ocean.
And then it's where did she go?
How does she go from the ocean with no boat? She's just swimming along. How does she get to where she's going next? There's drama there, really, right? And I do.
Well, that
exactly. So I'm a long-winded answer here to say that I love that it's willing to give us those little details to show us how she's going to get from jumping into the ocean to wherever we find her next. And obviously, at the end of this episode, again, spoiler alert, she is adrift, and there's some ship, some guy there that is going to rescue them. But there was a lot of drama along the way. And I applaud a TV show, and if a movie would ever to do this, I would certainly do the same, that they're willing to kind of give us those little details. I love that about this episode.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to give a nice little applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I definitely I agree because it is very, God knows how far she was from the mainland to get to essentially the Elven Promised Land. I forgot the name of it already, but it's like
Valinor.
it's Valinor. It seemed pretty far away. So I'm
Yeah.
like,
there's
no
a whole
way.
ocean in between that and Middle Earth.
Literally, she's like crossing like the Pacific Ocean to get. I was like, oh, she's just gonna swim. Okay, she's just gonna swim back. But I do agree with you there. It is nice how we got to see the journey back because obviously, ship. It's not just like the fast travel effect. Like, okay, well, she ends up here. It doesn't really matter. And it's like, well, it is nice to see how she meets, these other drifters, and then it's it must be really tough being an elf in Middle Earth because they are not liked at all.
No,
but
I mean, she has to hide the ears when she approaches. Like I like that little detail. And as you're saying, they clearly there's already I don't want to say a distrust, but there certainly is a hesitation amongst the crew there. And then once they find out she is an elf, then it's just full out distrust.
Yeah, like, oh, elf! Get her off the shaft. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. It is really nice. And the way that, there's like the sea snake, or, sea dragon, whatever you want to call it. The way they're able to like use the fins as like the wreckage and like the fins on the back. You didn't know which one it was. And I thought that was a great use of resources, and also her Galadriel swimming away from the sea snake, where it kind of like has a shot. It's not just her like paddling, like we see kind of like beneath the water for a bit. And I thought that was a really nice shot, just to add to the immersiveness. Like, hey, like there's something in the water, and you don't know what it is, and it's like it could be anything, But yeah, it was a real nice touch. And I really like how with Galadriel, her entire journey this episode at least was her jumping ship and her encounters between there, and then the rest of the drifters kind of get eaten up, of course. And then there's the one guy left where he said peace out, like, I'm not gonna get eaten by you guys, I'm gonna detach myself from the rest of the shaft and go about my way. I was like, wow, he really just said sayonara.
PCZ. Yeah, he's totally. And I'm really curious where that relationship goes. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that character that she's with on that raft, that's a fabricated character for this show.
I believe so. There's quite a few for the show, which honestly is, again, with movie and TV shows adaptations, it's
which I'm okay
totally
with.
Normal.
I just wanted to kind of ask to make that clear because I thought
I'm sure
I had heard that
character.
Okay, so real curious where that goes, and clearly there's, it's interesting, that dynamic, because the first thing he says about her is something to the effect of, you can't always trust first appearances or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
So there is something to Galadriel where he's also hesitant, and makes sense. What we learn about him is that the orcs had destroyed his home as well.
Yeah,
something they connect with.
And then her ears perked up.
Yeah,
she was
exactly.
Like,
and so he's emotionally vulnerable, just as she is. So they do bond over that, despite being total strangers, not sure if they can trust each other. But what's interesting about that shared bond is the moment with the storm, right? Because there's a moment like right before the lightning strike, she's asking him to join her next to that pole to almost offer comfort and safety to him as well. So again, showing a little bit of trust on her end, I guess.
Right.
And then you get both ways. Goes both ways. And then there's the lightning strike. And because he recognizes that gesture, he jumps in. And then, of course, there's the great irony that he has to use her brother's blade in order to save her, which I thought was a nice little detail as well. So while on the whole, broadly speaking, I'm still not sure about this whole motivation thing, the
Yeah,
revenge
yeah.
aspect. We'll see where it goes. Again,
Mhm.
I'm minded to it, but I will say how they utilized it in episode 2, poetry. I
Yeah.
thought it was really, really great.
It's like poetry, it rhymes.
Exactly. There's gonna be a
No.
lot of rhyming here, I imagine.
Oh, George Lucas sneaking his way into Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. And speaking of elves, can we trust them or not? I guess let's go ahead and transition to Elrond and Prince Durin the Fourth. I believe that character's
Yes.
name in.
Yes.
And I thought that was equally fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because Elrond, he shows up. He needs to, he's there for diplomacy, really, right? Because they need the dwarves' help to create.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
And
rings.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And we kind of know where that's heading. But as he walks up there, he's like, yeah, Prince Derwin and I, we go back.
Yeah.
We're good. We're good friends. They're going to welcome us with open arms. And then he walks in there and Prince Derwin is having absolutely none of it.
Mm-mm.
And again, it speaks to how easy I don't want to use distrust between these two, but maybe where things can get a little murky, right?
Mm.
Because of how they both perceive time. And I can't recall the exact details. I think I recall someone saying something that dwarves live to be 250 years old, something like that.
Yeah, they live longer lives, but not as
but they're not immortal, not
right.
like elves are. And there's an interesting line, right, where Prince Derwin says, I haven't seen you in 20 years. And Elrond very sincerely, and this is what I really like about the performance, because it's very sincere in how he responds. It's been 20 years. Like he had no idea.
Yeah.
It was like an hour passed by for us.
Well, when you're immortal, I mean, time is
exactly.
irrelevant.
Exactly. But I think that maybe that's part of the disparity between elves and all of the other races, right? Because they're immortal, they perceive time. They probably perceive the world so differently from everybody else.
Oh, yes.
And Elrond innocently didn't really mean to forego Prince Durin for 20 years. And in that time, he mentions that he got married, he had 2 kids. Like there were these significant life events where his friend wasn't around and he didn't know why. Elrond just wasn't there. But for Elrond,
it's like a
snap in time.
Like, oh man,
yeah,
that was like last Tuesdays, like when we saw each other.
Exactly. Had no idea. So I thought that was an interesting little dynamic. But of course, Elrond puts on the charm, talks him up a little bit.
Cunning.
They go and have dinner there. He's talking to his wife. I just thought that whole storyline in this episode was really fun and a little bit touching even.
No, I definitely agree. I think that was probably my favorite bit of this episode was the relationship, because like you said, Elrond, like he said it very sincerely, and then Durin's like he's like it's been 20 years. Like that's a long time to a dwarf. And the dwarves are very proud, they hold grudges, but clearly Durin cares about their relationship. But like he's so hurt, he's like, hey, like you said, all these significant life changes happen, like getting married, having kids, all this stuff, and he's like, you didn't come to my wedding. And it's I guess it is the smaller thing, or the smaller things that dwarves kind of, it's I guess the quality of life events. There's like, hey, like this is a big deal in our culture, and anyone who's going to be there. All your friends and family that you've formed these bonds with your entire life are going to be there for the most part. But it's like they're very proud people, and it's like he's definitely Durin's definitely holding this grudge where it's like, I can't believe my best friends missed X, Y, and Z, and haven't heard from them. And it's like obviously he misses Elrond.
Elrond, yeah.
Yeah, he clearly misses his elf buddy boy, but it's kind of, Elrond indirectly hurt Durin's feelings, and he sees that now. It's like, oh man, he sees the life that he's built, where he, how he met his wife, and where he lives and whatnot, like and his children, and it's like this his home life in general. So Elrond definitely feels guilty. Most elves wouldn't for the most part, but they are that that Legolas and Gimli, sorry, thank you. That it's kind of like a foil of their relationship, but
and again, the George Lucas poetry, right?
Yeah.
Because the dynamic here, while a little bit more friendly than what we see between Legolas and Gimli, it certainly foreshadows the rivalry that we come to see. And we do know that the relationship between dwarves and elves is much more strained in the next age, and especially as we get to the next stage.
The next stage. Yeah. And it's so funny. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. But
when they're doing the rock challenge, like they're smashing the rock.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, Durin's like, he's like, all right, he's like, you can meet my wife, but you can't stay for dinner. And then his wife's like, you can stay for dinner. He's like, you stay for dinner. He's like, but you better not enjoy the porridge. And it's like, whoa, like he's he's slowly but surely gaining his trust back, but it's like, he's just hurt that his friend
is hurt, and yes, it's understandable. It's very understandable why he would feel that way, because as someone that has an expiration date, and we certainly have this in our own lives, we can relate that
time's short.
Time, you certainly perceive time in a different way. And he screams that, like, that cathartic just outburst of, I've lived a whole life in this 20 years. Was really poignant. Like, I thought it was
a long time.
It was really great. And I do love Elrond's response to it, that, again, the sincerity of it, that, I messed up here. So let me apologize to you and to your family, and we can break bread and hopefully make amends. And also, I guess we'll see where things go in the next episode, but it does seem as if there's this duality of the personal. It does seem as if Elrond is sincere in terms of the personal dynamic, but he also knows that he has to mend this relationship. Because there's a larger plan in place as well. Right. So he's certainly kind of sharpening both sides of that blade, if you will. And at this point, I at least felt the sincerity from Elrond that, and again, it speaks to just the life of elves, that they just look at things very differently. But one little detail that also that I thought was really great in terms of harkening back to their relationship is the tree and Prince Derwin's home. Where his wife said that he takes care of it like a third child.
So he definitely cares. He's just not trying to show it. He's like, hey, I'm still pissing.
Exactly. And this is a gift from Elrond that he takes very seriously. So
and they said it wouldn't grow indoors as well. And he tried.
But he was able to make it grow. Absolutely, because of the care that he put into it. And that, to put that kind of effort into something that, where the odds are stacked against you, that speaks to how much Prince Derwin does care for Elrond, and why he was very upset when we first met him. And I do like how this episode fleshes that out, and I'm really curious to see where that dynamic goes. And because we do know that, that final scene when Prince Derwin is with his father, and they clearly have something that they don't want the elves to know about. So
it's definitely a mystery there. It has to be. It's the Oh my God, it's the Pulp Fiction, like, oh,
It
what's
is.
in the
It's the Pulp
suitcase?
Fiction. Yeah. Yeah. I imagine though we'll get an answer
For
to
sure.
this one. Okay, well let's shift gears from there. Let's talk. Where do you want to go next? Do you want to talk about the
We can talk about the
Mystery
Hard
Man?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the Mystery Man. Yeah, we can do the Mystery Man.
Mystery Man and Nori. And
Yeah, the
here's
Hardfoots.
yeah. Okay, well, first of all, let me ask you this because there's been a lot of theories on who Fiery Mystery Man is, and the number one leading contender seems to be that it's Gandalf.
Yeah,
Are
that's what people
you?
think.
Do you align with that theory? I'm
I
curious what you
honestly
think.
don't know. I feel like Gandalf is. I mean, it's hard to say because it could be Sauron in a different form because Sauron is a very, very cunning individual, where he
Mhm.
does take these different forms as he is resting or like I guess like if he is like wounded from battle. I mean,
Mhm.
it could be Gandalf. I feel like for adaptation's sake, it will be, but I feel like Gandalf has already been around for a while because Gandalf's pretty old.
I don't think this show has mentioned the five wizards at all yet,
No,
though,
it
right?
hasn't. So
Yeah.
maybe in this adaptation, like we said in the last episode, where Amazon doesn't necessarily have full rights to like the Silmarillion and things of this franchise, so they might have to, change a few things. It could be Gandalf.
But
It
at
could
the
be
same
Sauron. I don't
time,
know.
again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the five wizards,
Mhm.
they come during the third age, correct? At the beginning of the third
I
age?
think, yeah, I think you're
Am I
right.
wrong about that?
I
I
want to
think
say you're
that's what
right.
it is.
I would have to double check. There's
Yeah.
so much to this world, like with
It's a lot.
Tolkien,
No, I get it. I mean,
because
this is
I've never read the Lord of the Rings books. Like that is not.
yeah.
I tried, and I'm like
This is
I just end up watching the movies.
yeah,
The
this
Hobbit
is me.
I've read, but
Yeah,
that's
this is
about
me
it.
gathering nerd knowledge from others on TikTok and Twitter and other
No, it's
podcasts and
fine,
whatnot.
man. I mean, yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that's what I read, that they arrive at the beginning or sometime in the third age after Sauron had kind of made his name
Yeah, I
more
do.
prominent.
That does sound familiar. I want
I
to
could
say
be
that is
wrong about
true,
that.
but
But
yeah,
if that is true, that
let us
means
know.
this is some sort of early version of Gandalf.
Mm,
And if that is the case, then it's certainly outside my wheelhouse, at least at this point, in terms of what I would know about,
I
the
could see it
dynamic
being
of Gandalf in
Gandalf.
the second age.
Yeah,
So
I could see it being Gandalf for the sake of the series, especially for new people coming
yeah.
into, for new fans, because I mean, you don't necessarily have to watch Lord of the Rings
Mhm.
in order to watch Ring of Power. And I think this is, in order to get more viewers, it's like, hey, we're gonna spin this as Gandalf. And I mean, if it's Gandalf, that's totally fine with me. I don't really have any like qualms or anything with it. I know there's a lot of Lord of the Rings fans who know, you know, inside and out of the Silmarillion and everything else, where it's like, well, it's supposed to be this because, like I
Mhm.
said, this world is like extremely detailed, and I
It
mean,
is.
it's very
Yeah.
Christian based as well. So it's like there's so much stuff even before
Yeah.
the Rings of Power show. Like there's so
Yeah.
much
There's a
more.
lot of Catholicism
Yeah.
and Christian theology mixed in for sure. I will say on the Gandalf thing,
Mm.
part of me, I'm a little, I don't want to say mixed, but I don't know how to feel about it. Obviously, the show will go on to explain it further, so it's hard to
Mm.
really say until we come to understand the truth of who that character is.
Mm.
But from what I know about the lore, and maybe this show is, manipulating the lore here a little bit,
Yeah.
but from my understanding of things, the five wizards come either at the end of the second age, beginning of the third age, like somewhere around that time. And again, from my understanding, that Gandalf was known to be or expected to be the lesser of the five, which is
Mm.
part of the allure of that character, that he eventually becomes the best of them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that's the case, him coming sooner than everyone else. I guess we don't know that he's the only one,
right?
But assuming that he's the only one that we know of at this point anyway. Does that change the trajectory, the arc of the character that he had already had experience in this world, and then came back as Gandalf the Grey later on?
Right.
I don't know how to feel about that, because there's a little part of that feels like it would undermine the greatness of Gandalf's arc and how he would eventually become Gandalf the White and overcoming the odds stacked against him and what the gods expected of him. So I don't know, but I will say the theory makes sense to me because of really one reason. And I know people that are really into this they're stretching everything he says, everything he does, really getting into the nitty gritty details of, this is probably Gandalf because of this and because of that. The reason I think it might be Gandalf is not how he looks. It's not what he says. It's not any sort of indication that he himself is a version of Gandalf. The reason I think it might be is because in this episode, the person that he is with throughout most of it is Nori. Who does Nori remind you of?
Yeah, definitely Frodo, or I guess you could be Bilbo. Either or.
He gives off big time Frodo vibes.
Yeah,
Does she not?
does.
She is Frodo.
Does. I think she was actually made for the show as well. I believe so.
Man, I love Nori.
So. I do too. I love the Harfoots. Migration's starting soon.
It's so funny, Christian. I almost had to pause the episode and almost laugh at myself, because the other hesitation I talked about for episode 1 was, I don't know if I love all of these performances, and I still hold true to that with episode 1. Episode 2 starts off with Nori and Poppy and Markella Kavanaugh, who plays Nori here. I think it's really great. I think she's so good.
Oh yeah,
she's so good. I've fallen in love with that character already, and it's just episode 2. Like, I'm hooked, and maybe it's just there's something about the innocence that she embodies, the eagerness to do the right thing, to help out in this grand cause despite her stature. That again is so reminiscent of Frodo.
Yeah,
that
it really
couldn't
is.
help but love the endearing. It's part of it is the writing for sure. I do really like the writing of the character, and again how it harkens back to Frodo. But I think Kavanaugh's performance is really great in bringing that out as well. So between her and Morfydd Clark, the performances on the whole in this episode were really terrific for the most part. So again, go back to what I said, like it could just be an episode 1 thing. Like it may
be, like gosh, we haven't really had a lot of, I mean, I guess you could say The Hobbit. God, one of those movies come out like mid, like 20.
I need to rewatch them. I have not seen them since they came out in theaters.
I don't want to rewatch them.
Fair.
Oh gosh, the Hobbit movies. The first one was really good. I just don't understand how you make a trilogy out of like this small little book. It was very weird for me, because it was supposed to be 2 movies and then they made it into 3.
Well, here's another reason I want to go back and rewatch them. And I'm with you. When they first came out, when I saw them in theaters, and again, to be fair to them, I have not seen them since they came out in theaters. I did not care for them really all that much. Even the first one I thought was mediocre at best, and it just really derailed even further after that. However, I am curious to go back and revisit them, because one, Gimli and Lord of the Rings is just awesome.
Oh yeah.
So I have to give the series another chance, just because the culture of what Gimli represents and what Peter Jackson does in those films is really alluring. And then also going back to what we were talking about earlier with Prince Derwin, we forgot to mention this, but we get that but we get that wide shot. The term escaped me for a second, but we get that wide shot of Khazad-dûm in its full glory, because you remember in Lord of the Rings where we find it is
it is
abandoned
yeah
and taken over by orcs.
yeah
So it's really dark and
dusty,
really dusty and
it's like thriving now. It's like there's
and now it's in its heyday,
everywhere.
it's in its prime, it's thriving, full of life. It's green, there's water, there's gold and metallic everywhere. It was a really incredible setting, a nice juxtaposition to what we saw in the Lord of the Rings, where it was this place of carnage and death and darkness. And what we see here is the complete opposite. It's full of life. And that I think is great. And because of that, and knowing that we're more than likely going to get more of it as the series goes, because obviously the Hobbit movies, I don't know if it's the exact same place, but the dwarves are obviously part of that trilogy, right? Big part of that trilogy. I haven't seen it since theaters, but to just be fair to it, because of the setting and the cinematography and just the whole Lord of the Rings aesthetic, and obviously the culture and lore of all of these characters, I'd be willing to give it a try again to see if it compares at all to the Lord of the Rings, or even what we've already seen in brief glimpses.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think my only issue with the Hobbit movies is that they tried to make it too much like Lord of the Rings, because there are a lot of characters that they put into the Hobbit movies that don't show up in the book or any other adaptation of the Hobbit.
Yeah,
like Legolas is not there.
Yeah.
He is not there. There was a ring in the Hobbits, but it wasn't the ring. It was just a ring in general. And then I think Christopher Tolkien kind of made the connection, like, oh, you can kind of make the connection between the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, because the Hobbit is more for children, like adolescents, and then obviously when you get to Lord of the
small
Rings,
too. Like it's a small book.
Yeah, it's a very small book. Yeah. It was. I mean, like everything else, written for children, but beloved by adults.
Yeah. Well, the studios were like, "Look, we gotta give this a trilogy."
Yeah, but I would want to. I mean, they're on HBO Max. I mean, I don't have to buy them, so that's the only thing I care about.
I will say, like, I don't know if you've seen any of the behind the scenes of the Hobbit trilogy, but
I have.
The thing that has always stuck with me is how those movies nearly killed Peter Jackson.
Yeah. Like, oh my gosh. Yes.
It took so much out of him. Like it just destroyed him. Like his soul,
Guillermo del Toro was supposed to. Yeah. Because Peter Jackson went through a lot of like health issues, and it's like, I mean, you can already tell he was burnt out from Lord of the Rings. Like, I mean, he gave it his all. He wanted to do The Hobbit a while ago, like before he did Lord of the Rings, but then everything with Lord of the Rings happened, and then Guillermo del Toro was supposed to direct the 2 Hobbit movies. And then I guess he kind of Guillermo was like kind of waiting around for a while. Then he kind of just left because the project wasn't going anywhere. And they're like, oh, we'll get Peter Jackson to do it. He's like,
and it nearly destroyed him. I mean, Andy Serkis basically said that he ghost directed at least the last film and maybe even parts of Desolation of Smaug as well. So it
shows. I mean, it sucks that, Guillermo wasn't able to, because he was so passionate about this. I was watching Lindsay Ellis's deep dive on The Hobbit. It's on her YouTube channel. It's actually very, very informative. And Guillermo del Toro was like so excited to like dive into this world, and he just never got a chance. And then, I mean, I felt bad for Peter Jackson too. That entire Hobbit production for all 3 movies, it was a train wreck. It was really bad.
Right. I will say though, I could be mixing up my details here, but if I recall correctly, because I'm trying to piece the timeline together, I think the reason Del Toro left is because he finally got the green light to do Pacific Rim.
Oh,
I'll be
maybe.
honest, I love that
Maybe.
movie. So,
Hey, no, it's a great movie. I mean,
I
yeah.
know it's like a give and take, I guess, because Del Toro, what he's done in the last decade, I've really liked. I'm a big fan of The Shape of Water. I think it gets overhated, in
I
film
used to hate it when
discourse.
I was a kid. Now it's okay.
But that is to say, though that Hobbit trilogy certainly is very messy, but I'm curious to go back and revisit because obviously I love what Lord of the Rings did, but these first two episodes, in particular, episode 2, has really reinvigorated my love for this world, and I'd be willing to give those films another shot. Mess and all, just to kind of get back in
Yeah.
that world and just kind of see another angle of those characters and that specific setting. And obviously, as we've been noting, the dwarf elements of those movies. So anyway, circling back to episode 2 of the Rings of Power. So mystery character Nori has been great.
Right.
I've loved seeing that character, where we're going. And then there's the other thread of the mother and son. The characters' names are escaping me at the moment.
There's Theo's the kid. I forgot the mother's name, but I just know Theo.
Yeah.
He's a small little boy who has like a very manly voice. Like,
Yeah.
wow, you have a very deep voice.
Yeah. What's interesting to me about those scenes, and obviously there's the moment with the orc.
That was pretty cool.
That sequence, that whole series, or that thread in this episode, to me, is what reminds me of what I love so much about J.A. Bayona as a horror director, and I think he's very good as a horror director because those scenes are really well shot in terms of tension and just the tenseness of what's happening there. That Bayona does a really great job of, making those scenes feel visceral. That I really liked. So, I mean, that's probably my least favorite element of this episode. But
yeah,
still well shot. Like I'm still intrigued because of Bayona's direction. If that
it's
makes
just right. It's just, I think with that, it's probably the most mysterious thread so far. I mean, I guess, it would be like the most least interesting because it's like, okay, clearly this human and this elf have a hots for each other, but it's like, and then Theo finds like this Sauron's like blade or whatever, and it bleeds into, like, he bleeds into the blade and it's like growing, but that's another reason, which is probably what the goblin or orc was looking for. But I mean, she came out swinging and beheaded that thing super quick, and she's like, hey, we need to leave, like, now.
Because
no one was listening to her.
That was a great moment. I
mean, even within Tolkien's world, like, men, the race of men always is probably the most problematic because of how flawed humans are when it comes to pretty much anything, like, especially with I think it was Isildur, when he had a chance to throw the ring of power into Mount Doom. They were literally right there, and he's like, no, I'm gonna keep it. And then it's like, it's the selfish nature of humans, definitely the most flawed race out of any other race in Tolkien's world. And you really see that in this small little town because nobody wants to believe, heed any type of warning, even within their own race. And it takes, a beheading of an orc to be like, we need to leave. Like, something is up here. We saw something in episode 1 with the cows, like the blue or black gunk or whatever. It's like, well, clearly that's not normal. So we need to investigate. But I really like how men is depicted in this series so far because they are just so. I mean, I guess you could say selfish in a way, and just not.
There's definitely an ego to them.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
I mean, and that's constant throughout all of these films, really, right? Because I think about Boromir and Fellowship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the choices that he makes there is very ignorant and a little egotistical, and obviously that cost him his life in the end. Or I think about, the king of Rohan.
Yeah,
When,
yeah.
at the end of Two Towers, right? Because they defeat the orcs, and then what Gandalf is like, hey, war is coming. We need to be able to send aid to Gondor. And he's like, those guys. Screw them.
Yeah.
They're on their own.
Literally.
So,
they're so divided.
Yeah, and then when we get to Gondor, you see I guess he's not the king because the king has yet to return.
Right.
Hence the return of the king. But the king in place, if you will.
Right. The pseudo king.
That dude is out of his mind. Like he's just mentally not there at all. No. So clearly a lot of these characters of men anyway, the men of Middle Earth are volatile creatures, probably the most volatile. And there is a level of ignorance to them. So it makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
That when she's like, I think we should leave. They're like digging tunnels and they're like, forget it.
Yeah.
No.
Like the elves are gone. Life is good. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
It's not.
So, yeah. So I totally bought all of that. Yeah. And that's what makes when she slams the orc's head.
That was a great cut, by the way. That was a great cut. Like going through the beheading and then it just boom, right on the table. I was like, oh.
Yeah, made for a really great moment. So
yeah.
And that's why, like, I say that it's my least favorite of the threads, but I still am intrigued. Like, there's still good things about that, about that element of the story that is compelling. So, on the whole, episode 2, I tell you what, episode 1, I was a little. I mean, to say I was mixed is apt. I
feel like it's fair.
Good, so bad. I was right in the middle, and then episode 2 hooked me.
It did
fully.
It did.
I'm ready. I'm ready to dive more into this. So.
Oh yeah.
I'm excited. Any final thoughts before we round out?
Discussion? No, I mean, yeah, like you said, I feel like even the premiere of an episode. I mean, it was very mixed for me. I know not all season premieres are like these super big bangers, but it is about the journey, and it is like sometimes it just takes a while for a show to find its footing. And we've seen that with a lot of like great sitcoms, like with The Office. The first season of The Office is not good, but people still watch it. But when it comes to the humor and like the signature of The Office, of their humor, it really happens like season 2 onward. So like sometimes it just takes a little bit more time for certain shows to find their footing. I think House of the Dragon has hit that from the ground running, but for Lord of the Rings, like, I mean, these are two different shows. House of the Dragon is fantasy, but it is fantasy grounded in reality almost. There's a lot of great characters within that universe, but with Lord of the Rings, there are clear good guys and bad guys. There is, the black and white, good versus evil. I mean, that's literally what Lord of the Rings is all about. So, it just takes a little bit of time, but that is more high fantasy where there is a lot more lore and just so many things to explore, like we said before. But yeah, I really enjoyed episode 2. Very consistent. It didn't feel like, we got to go through this storyline. Like, everything felt more familiar, and I'm very excited for episode 3.
Yep, I am right there with you. I'm very excited for episode 3 as well. I really liked what they did in terms of continuing the threads established in episode 1. heightening the stakes a little bit more, but also taking its time, really fleshing out those details, the characters' emotions, as I don't want to say futile, but as volatile as it can be. Like I just kind of love that Prince Durin through half of this episode was just really petty.
Oh
just flat out petty. Right?
He was mad. I'm like, you know
he
what?
was just so angry.
Oh yeah.
But it makes sense. It makes sense. And then when he's cathartic about it, you really feel it. You feel the emotion there. It's very touching. The whole dinner sequence they have is great. All the Galadriel stuff I really liked, as we mentioned. So the little details of this episode, I think, were wonderful. And then to reiterate the Nori Frodo thing, that could very quickly become my favorite element of the show if the trajectory of it goes the way I'm hoping that it does. That character, because I really fell for her here. They connected her to Frodo in some really great ways. So that's why if Mystery Man is Gandalf,
I'm okay with it.
Else, more than all of the nerdisms where people are trying to Inspector Gadget, trying to figure out, is this guy?
We have enough of that with the MCU.
He said this, and he did this, and he did the Fireflies thing in the sky, and like none of that matters.
I don't even care who.
If he's Gandalf, it's because he's with a descendant of Frodo, or I guess the opposite. Frodo would be a descendant of her,
ancestor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, like that to me, that's the poetry. Like that's the connective tissue there.
Exactly. I mean, there is no better pairing, honestly. With
exactly.
I absolutely love it.
With all of that, thank you, Christian, for being here once again. Really do appreciate it, my friend. Thank you to everyone for tuning into this episode. Again, to our patrons, if you're listening to this in the early access period, really appreciate your support. And if you want to get early access to this, for those listening after it is released to the public, patreon.com/InSessionFilm. You can sign up for as low as $1 a month. You get early access to not only these bonus content episodes, but any Patreon content we have up there. So be sure to go and check all of that out. And Christian and I will be back for episodes 3 and 4 here pretty soon. We'll figure out the scheduling and we'll get it all out there. So,
heck
all right, thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you all next time.
See ya.